And good afternoon, NBA world. We are back with another edition of NBA Unplugged. I'm your host, Jacob Noble from the ProBasketballTalk.com, and alongside of me, as always, be Brian Geltzeiler from the HoopsCritic.com. He is on his way on here. We have a very, very special show for you, especially if you were in the Northeast region, because we have a couple of Knick bloggers coming on here. We got Tommy D from the KnicksBlog.com joining us, as well as Moke Hamilton from Sheridan Hoops, as well as the KnicksBlog.com, and he writes for probably 4 or 5 other alias websites as well that kind of just take all his posts. Because let's see, he's an opinion guy, so we're excited to have him on today. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Knicks and the other teams in the Eastern Conference that are fighting for their playoff lives, and kind of talk about what we think is going to happen come down the road, when the playoffs come around. And I do believe we have 17 days until the regular season ends, so it's going to be very, very exciting to see where we go here. And these playoff runs in the shortened season, every game matters, and there's 3 or 4 teams fighting for those last 2 spots on both sides of the league, and we're here to break it down for you. So that's going to be very exciting. They're going to be joining us around 5:15. So until then, Brian and I will kind of just talk about today's news, go around the league with our opinions. Maybe we'll throw some MVP candidates out there with our picks, and we'll see where that goes. But as we wait a couple of minutes for Brian to hop on with us, it should be a very, very exciting show today. In other news, Derrick Rose decided to sprain his ankle again, which is not good for the Bulls, which may open up the chance for some other team to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. I know a lot of people don't think that's going to happen. However, with that injury, it makes it more likely that it could happen. And I know a couple of Knick guys are going to come on here and talk to us a little bit about why they think the Knicks can do it. I know Moke wrote a nice piece on Sheridan Hoops a few days ago about the Knicks' chances, about how they've improved their defense, how they could win a series against the Bulls. He's not saying they will. He said they could, and, I went on there trolling their comment section, trying to bring Knick fans down. But since that time, the Knicks are making me a believer as well. So we'll talk to them a little bit about that. We'll trade jabs at each other, and we'll have a good grand time on this podcast as we discuss the playoff push, as I like to call it, as I threw a post up there the other day on the Eastern Conference playoff push, and tonight I'll do one for the Western Conference, and every other day I'll kind of go back and forth and just kind of update everybody on, the current standings, and as we wind down with 17 days left, under 10 games remaining, and, the seedings are up for grabs, and it's really going to be a matchup nightmare for everybody, is where do you go and who do you match up with? And now alongside of me is Brian Geltzeiler. How you doing today, Brian?
I'm good, Jacob. How you doing today, man? I'm
good.
a little hurting today, so we're gonna have to you're gonna have to work with me a little bit, suffering from a cold, but I'm playing hurt today.
Oh, no, this weather change all the time. But I was just kind of telling our readers of our 2 great guests that will be coming on and talk a little bit about the chances, especially now with Derrick Rose spraining his ankle on his return. So that kind of opens up the window for other teams. So you say, hey, maybe we can get a shot at the Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Listen, it certainly puts the Knicks in a position where they can move up a little bit. And it's interesting. We'll get a different viewpoint from Tommy and from Moke today in reference to what they think, because Moke especially believes that, and I'm not going to look to steal any of his thunder, but he especially believes that the Knicks could actually take the Bulls in a series. I don't agree. I think the Knicks are going to struggle with the Bulls in a series. But not having Rose tonight puts the Knicks in a position where they need wins right now. You know what? There's with them, Philly, and Milwaukee, that's 2 playoff spots with 3 teams. And if you look at the 3 schedules of the teams, the Knicks are clearly the most difficult schedule of those 3 teams. And Milwaukee is clearly the easiest. So catching a night tonight where you play the Bulls, you beat them on Sunday, in a little bit of a bizarre game in the respect that you're not going to see Gang and Rose each miss 2 free throws apiece in the last minute of a game, and Carmelo Anthony throwing in 25-footers, But so they won that one, and then they come in tonight going into Chicago without Rose, gives you a legit shot to sweep Chicago in a home and put you in a better position just to make sure you get in. I don't even look at the Knicks seeding as much as being an issue. Just qualify for the playoffs, because not qualifying for the playoffs provides no benefit to the Knicks because they don't have a draft pick.
And it's not so much that is if they don't make the playoffs, it's going to be a huge colossal failure. You have two all-stars, perennial all-stars on the team, and everyone so highly touts those guys. Yeah, they dealt with injuries, but everyone dealt with injuries this year. But for them to not make the playoffs will be catastrophic, in my opinion. That would just be, the nail in coffin. You should just fire everybody who's in the front office or on the coaching staff. Just get rid of everybody because, it'd be time to clean house if they don't make the playoffs, after the acquisitions. And they did good in the draft last year. They got some good pieces, and they got a talented roster. So for them not to make the playoffs in the East would be a laughing stock, in my opinion. But to reiterate your point there about the Chicago Bulls, that game kind of highlights your point, and I share your point that, I don't see the Knicks, sustaining, and we'll talk with the Knicks guys when they get on here, but I don't see the Knicks being able to hang with the Bulls in the series for that reason alone. They needed everything they could get out of everybody on their team. Melo was, throwback Syracuse Melo, where just put the team on his back, and, they snuck that win out. And the Bulls, didn't play their best. They rarely let opponents score 100 points. But there it was. It was the perfect storm. And to have it for 7 games, it's not going to happen.
I agree. I absolutely agree with you. I don't think it's the Knicks. It's been a tough year for the Knicks, and they've played. Listen, they're a very good defensive basketball team, better than anybody realizes. They're pretty deep, even with the injuries. There's some depth there, but they've had a point guard problem all year. Jeremy Lin solved that for a period of time. Now he's hurt. I mean, I thought it made a pretty big statement about what Mike Woodson thinks about Baron Davis right now, that they had Amon Shumpert down the stretch of that bowl game playing point guard. Now, Shumpert did a fantastic job defending Derrick Rose and should have been on the floor, but you didn't think enough to Davis that you could hide him on Kyle Korver out on a wing on a guy that's not going to put the ball on the floor, and pretty much you just got to stay in front of him if he's going to shoot. They didn't think enough to Davis to do that, and that's a problem for the Knicks because Jeremy Lin's not going to be back for the first round of the playoffs. Baron Davis is not healthy, or if Woodson doesn't trust him enough, this is a Knicks team that's a lot closer to the team that struggled earlier in the year than the one that we've just seen a lot of success out of.
Yeah, and the Baron Davis story is definitely something very interesting to look at because, he was kind of looked at as their savior. Then Jeremy Lin kind of, resurrected like Jesus, and then everyone forgot about Baron Davis. And now there's no Lin, and now we're kind of looking back on Baron Davis saying, hey, where are you, buddy? But, his history the past few years have shown that, he's not really that serviceable, You don't get waived off a team and traded, multiple times in the past couple of years if you're good, unless somebody's given up a lot to get you, and in that case you would only be traded once. So I think there's a lot of flags around there. Then plus, we both kind of looked at the situation in the beginning of the year with his injury, and it took him months to get back. Once he became a Knick, it took him a while, and all this stuff, and reports flying all over the place. So there's just too many questions and not enough answers in that situation for them. But you're absolutely right. The defense is something I do want to get to because, and we'll get to that when they all join on because. A couple of Knicks fans, on Sheridan Hoops kind of pointed out to me that the Knicks are better than what I'm giving them credit for. And I got to come on here and say, you know what, you guys are right. I was giving them a bad shake, and, it's more so individual efforts that I kind of give them a bad shake opposed to actually looking at what the team does, its statistics, and how they play the game. The only concern I have, and I don't know if you share this, is that I just think that they do not control the pace well enough to be considered a very good defensive team, a term you used. They're around the top 10, in the 10, 11 ranked on a lot of categories. They jump up to the top 5 in a couple, I believe, points allowed, but their pace is at the bottom of the league. They're running too fast of a pace to be considered a defensive team, and when you match up with teams that do a very good job of controlling the pace, I think that's where they'll get in trouble.
I think there's something to that, and I'm going to take what your statement and your question in 2 parts there. The first part being in reference to their defense. I did a spot on TKB TV with Tommy D. We did a little home and home with Tommy and Moke today. But I did a spot earlier today with Tommy, and Moke during that spot described the Knicks as a magnificent defensive team. And as much as I wanted to turn around and say magnificent, I couldn't argue with them. They've played great defensively. You got to think about this, especially as of late. But when you can put Chandler and Jared Jeffries on the court together, you can keep teams out of the paint very well. I mean, to me, Chandler is a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. He really is. And if you can have Shumpert with them as a perimeter defender, you got some guys that can play some real good defense on the court. And while I'm on Shumpert, it's going to go into your next point, which is I agree with you about controlling the tempo. D'Antoni had this team running. This is not running personnel. This is not up-tempo personnel. This is slower-tempoed personnel. Woodson had them slowing down. Lynn responded very well to that. Even Davis responded very well to that. But now you get in a situation where you're asking Shumpert to handle the ball. Shumpert offensively kind of goes off the reservation sometimes to do his own thing, and there's not enough of the thought of tempo control and setting up an offense. Shumpert, he gets some defensive rebounds, he generates turnovers, and which is great because it creates extra possessions, but he doesn't always preserve those possessions. He burns them sometimes doing his own thing, and that plays to your point about not controlling the tempo great. With one of their pure point guards on the court, they can control tempo much better. They go to Shumpert at point, there's no thought of tempo control, and that's dangerous for the Knicks because they do a much better job when the game's slower, as you see when Woodson got hired, slowed down the tempo, and they came out 1-8-9.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And going back to the Defensive Player of the Year, this might be a year where, and I know we were talking about on Twitter a little bit, tying in the MVP here, where LeBron James might sweep all awards. He's having one of the quietest seasons out there. And, I'm only talking about this because you mentioned Tyson Chandler in the talks for Defensive Player of the Year, but, in my opinion, you could argue for many guys. You could argue for Ibaka. You can argue for Iguodala, although they've taken a dip lately. You can even argue for Avery Bradley, in my opinion. He's changed the way that team is played up there. He's taken the pressure off Rajon Rondo having to defend everybody and making up for Allen's mistakes. You keep going around. Obviously, Dwight's in the conversation. And so, to me, there's no real clear-cut winner, and you're absolutely right. It could be anyone from Tyson, Ibaka, to LeBron James.
Well, I'll tell you this. It's funny because you left out to me who I thought were the two
Tony Allen.
most likely candidates. Well, I love Tony Allen, but I wasn't. And you could any year Tony Allen plays and starts like he did this year, you can give him Defensive Player of the Year, and you won't be wrong. That's how good Tony Allen is as a perimeter defender. But that's not the guy I was going to say. The two guys that I look at for Defensive Player of the Year are Tyson Chandler, I mentioned before, who I think has had as good a year defensively as you can see a big man have. Better than Howard, by the way. And the other guy is a Celtic also, but not Avery Bradley. I think Kevin Garnett's defensive year and what he's done for the Celtics has been absolutely unbelievable. Because here's the one thing, okay, when it comes to the Celtics, that always shocks the hell out of me. What shocks the hell out of me is that they're able to play as well as they do without rebounding the ball well. They're not a good rebounding team.
It's amazing.
Their defense is so good that they can get away with being the worst rebounding team in the NBA. And I think the reason is because of Garnett's pick-and-roll defense and Garnett's defense at the rim. Bass has fallen into line a little bit. Avery Bradley's an excellent individual defender, a fantastic perimeter defender. But the team concept is there. There's no holes. And Garnett is always the anchor of that defense. So, this is a team right now that's playing 7 guys and Greg Steamsma. This is not a deep team. But Kevin Garnett, as Defensive Player of the Year, I just don't think you can go wrong. I saw Zach Lowe and Kevin Arnovitz both mentioned it on Twitter today, and actually they're both kind of along the right lines.
You're absolutely right. We saw what happened when Garnett wasn't in town, and then this whole mindset changed when he took over the center position because there was a clear hole at center, a clear hole. With Garnett now playing the center position, and he doesn't want to, and that just shows about his professionalism and who he is as a character. Same thing with Ray, coming off the bench, and it's a luxury to have those kind of guys. They don't want to do it, but they're going to do it. And Garnett at 35 years old, however old he may be today, playing the center position without a true solid power forward is remarkable. Because no one else
I don't want to interrupt you, but can I say this?
Go for it.
Brandon Bass has been a pretty solid power forward this year.
Oh,
a little bit undersized, but he's been pretty good, Jacob.
Yeah, he's been solid, but there's not someone, if there's somebody bigger than Garnett, who can help Garnett body him. Garnett's a small frame. He's 6'11", but he's, 220 soaking wet. There's not another big body to take on, when you go up against the Perkinses, the Kendrick Perkins or the Dwight Howards, and, he's got to man those guys, and that is a lot to take on top of all the things you mentioned about, controlling the play in the paint, switching and clogging those lanes. He's got to do all that on top of worrying about, the bigger guys in the league. It's something he's, hasn't done in his career, and he's doing it at such a late age, and he's doing it so efficiently that it's absolutely mind-boggling, and it's something truly pleasurable to watch.
Absolutely. I love watching the guy play defense, and it's funny because I talked about in a piece I wrote earlier in the year that Garnett is not, was one of the best defensive players I've ever seen, and kind of this year is falling. Still a very good defensive player, but falling off a little bit. I got to eat my words, man. The guy's as good as ever. And he's tremendous, and it's brains, it's the long arms, it's the whole package. It's defending the screen and roll. You want to teach a guy how to defend screen and roll? Run tape of how Garnett does it with the flash and recover. It's absolutely unbelievable.
It's something absolutely to watch. And then we got a couple more minutes till the Knicks guys hop on here, and we really get nitty gritty with the Knicks. Any other topics you want to run through around the league? You want to debate where Noel Nerlens is going to be going next year?
Who is?
Noel Nerlens, the number one prospect going into college this year.
Oh, I don't think we need to go there.
Yeah, I know. You don't care about high school guys. They're not polished enough for you yet.
I don't think we need to go there, but I'll tell you what is interesting. The bottom of the West playoff. I think that's real interesting.
Absolutely, and I talked about it a little before you hopped on here as I'm doing these playoff push articles where, I'm charting them, I'm buying and selling them like they're stock. And it's kind of funny where, the matchups, I have one buy and one sell. So, if I'm buying the 8 seed, I'm usually selling the 8. If I'm buying the 1 seed, I'm usually selling the 8 seed. And, looking at that race, it's just like every day I'm changing my mind. And today I got Dallas going out, and I got the Phoenix Suns are going to get into the playoffs. But you know what? Tomorrow that might change. And the day after that might change. It's going to be a day-to-day thing, and that's going to be very exciting. It hasn't been like that in a while, in my opinion, or just, seen it around the league, especially out east. It's shocking that we even have two teams fighting out east for that 8th spot, but and they're actually not Mr. Irrelevant like they used to be. But you're right, that West, 8th, 7th, and 6th spot is going to be one big battle.
It's going to be a big battle. The most interesting part to me is watching the defending world champions maybe not make the playoffs.
Very interesting.
Suns are 1 back in the loss column. Utah's 2 back in the loss column. Dallas a mess. And the thing about Dallas is somehow Dallas had this belief that their biggest problem was Lamar Odom. Lamar Odom was a problem, but he was far from their biggest problem. This is an old team. This is a roster that is very, very flawed. Not having Chandler's been a killer. Not having Beret has been a killer. They expected Rodrigue Beaubois to do a lot more to replace Barea, and he's just been way erratic. Delonte West was helping earlier in the year. He got hurt. Vince Carter's played decently. Had a good first half of the season. Fallen off in the second half. Hasn't been unbelievable. Jason Kidd's like a statue out there. I saw a stat on him the other day, Jacob. 80% of the shots he's taken this year have been threes. He's a statue. And this is a guy who was defending Dwayne Wade in the finals last year effectively. The fall-up's been huge. And, Jason Terry, the age is starting to show. The one guy who's kind of defied age there has been Marion. Dirk made a mistake playing this summer. With this compressed schedule, it's been killing him. He's a cut below what he's been. Dallas in trouble. And they certainly could be past here to make the playoffs, and that'd be a pretty crazy thing to see, considering that they also traded their first-round pick.
Yeah, and then we talked about it, a little bit last week that, they're kind of just looking forward to the summer. At least management and coaching staff seems to be doing that. They're kind of honing in on the Deron Williams sweepstakes. But we have a caller from 111. Is this Moke or is this Tommy D?
Yeah, this is Moke. How's it going?
It's good, Moke. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing okay, man. Now, I got to tell you this, all right? There comes a time in life where you got to look around and say, man, I've made it. And for me, being on this show with you guys today, it's one of those moments. Mama, look at me now.
Well, let me tell you something. First of all, Moke Hamilton from SheridanHoops.com, everybody, is joining us right now. My buddy and my friend. And let me say this to you, Moke. If I'm believing that, then you got a bridge to sell me that attaches New York and New Jersey.
And we also got Tommy joining us now as well from the 914.
Well, what a great segue here, talking about bridges. I'm looking at the Manhattan Bridge from the office downtown, and I don't think it has a for sale sign on it, B. So I don't know what I can do for you, but I'm happy to be here.
Tommy D from the KnicksBlog.com. Tommy, we are thrilled to have you with us as well. We were talking a little Knicks earlier. We're going to jump back to that with you guys. Jacob, you want to kick off with these guys and fire something out and we can let the fur fly a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. So, I don't know if Moke saw my post on his or my comments on his post on Sheridan Hoops, but I wasn't drinking the Knick Kool-Aid at that time, and since that time he made that post, I've come around, I've done my research, I've looked into the stats. So I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. I'm not someone to run and hide. I'll apologize to those people. The Knicks are a much better defensive team than I like to give them credit for. But Brian and I were kind of talking about something a second ago, and that is the pace that they play. They play a very, very fast pace, and in my opinion, you can't have a fast pace and be a very good defensive team all at once. You got to kind of pick and choose. As the best defensive teams tend to slow the pace down and limit possession. So we'll start with Moke since he wrote the article. Talk to us a little bit about the pace of the Knicks, and do you see it as a bigger problem that I see it as going against, as you pointed out, the Chicago Bulls in the first round if they get that 8th seed?
It's such a funny thing that you asked that, Jacob, because earlier Brian said that one of the issues that he had with Iman Shumpert was he felt like when Shump did something well in the defensive end, he and Carmelo were both pretty adept at what I call the Karl Malone move. They try to go after the ball when it's being held down low by the offensive player, right? But the thing is, when he and Carmelo create turnovers, they try to get the ball up court very quickly, and they try to score. They try to get fast break points. And, when that happens, it's good for the team, right? As many easy buckets as they can get is a positive. You take those points as you can get them. But at the same time, I totally understand what you're saying with the pace of the game, because sometimes, without a true floor general out there, sometimes on breaks the Knicks look lost. So I think that, the defense is definitely good. I totally understand what you say about the pace, and I think that it is really a product of poor decision-making by whoever is leading the break. Because when you look at the entire roster, there's not really someone that you're very, very comfortable with running the ball up court and making a good decision with it and, getting somebody a dunk. So I think that those things are kind of related there.
Interesting, and I happen to agree. Tommy, I'm going to ask you a question. Jacob and I we were discussing Defensive Player of the Year candidates, and Kevin Arnovitz and Zach Lowe both earlier today tweeted that they felt like Kevin Garnett was in the conversation. I happen to agree with them both. The other guy that's in the conversation is Tyson Chandler, who has anchored the Knicks defense in a way. I mean, Moke earlier today on the spot that we did on TKB TV described the Knicks defense as magnificent. I don't think you could really argue with that. I think their defense has been that good. Talk a little bit about what Chandler's meant and where you think Chandler lies in the Defensive Player of the Year argument.
Well, anybody who talks about the Knicks over the last couple of years, specifically as it relates to, the D'Antoni era, they weren't known for their defense, and people would say straight away that there just seemed to be a lack of effort. I think Jacob brings up a great point about pace and saying that, I think people specifically look at field goal percentage and points allowed, and I think people have wised up over the last couple of years in terms of points per 100 possessions, and that's significant. I like overall defensive rating and what, as a stat barometer, what Tyson Chandler has brought instantaneously from the first day that he came here was someone who was going to be a serious presence within the paint. Now, what's significant about those type of players is, if you can get through, to use a football analogy, they'd be kind of like that Ronnie Lott or that Steve Atwater, where if you get through, the line and then the linebackers, you're going to have to deal with that secondary. So obviously you're gaining positive yardage, but you're aware when you get to that 8 to 10 or 15-yard mark, you're going to be aware of Tyson Chandler in the paint once you get past the guards and the secondary help defenders. And that's where the Knicks really struggle, and that's where Shumpert helps them. When Shumpert's playing well defensively with his energy, which he seems to often do, it prohibits those guys from getting all the way into the lane and all the way to the rim. And, Chandler, from a defensive standpoint, certainly protects the rim, but he also closes out possessions. And that's something that, on the opposite offensive end for him, is also one of his strengths. is that he keeps possessions alive. When you add those two things together, that's his true value for me, is that he just gives you more chances. If they had anybody else besides Novak who could shoot from the outside, they'd be a really hard team to deal with on a night in and night out basis. I mean, I'm sure they do more than a couple, one or two games over 500. But Brian, he instantaneously comes in from Dallas and anchors, playing more minutes certainly. But when you talk about players of the year defensively, he definitely by himself has made the Knicks a top 10, top 5 defensive team, and that has to come with a lot of merit.
Well, the thing about Tyson Chandler to me is, if he's not doing defense, he's not doing his job. His job's not to score. His job's not to lead. His job is to one thing and one thing only, and to protect the paint and to rebound. And he's done a fantastic job. So, he's earning his money this year, and we'll see, how long down the road he earns his money. But what I want to turn the focus to is, the coaching staff here, Mike Woodson, and I don't know, you guys, better access than I do to the Knicks. To me, it just seemed like he didn't get to, staple his defense as much as he'd like to. And since D'Antoni has moved on, it's all been Woodson. And, he's got the open floor to run with it. Pun intended for D'Antoni there, but he's finally getting to coach, lead a practice that he wants to lead, and teach these guys a defensive, mindset that he has and always had, and it's showing clearly with the improved defense over the past couple of weeks. But my question to you guys, and I kind of want to talk to you guys about this. I posted it on Moke's post as well, and we'll start with Moke. Is what do you guys look at when you see players who dog it for coaches? So they clearly weren't playing for D'Antoni. Everyone saw it. They were underachieving, and then now they got a new coach, and now they're playing like they want to. Does that concern you if you're a Knicks fan going into the playoffs?
Well, I think that when you have a situation where you have to question players' effort, I think no matter who the coach is, one thing as a player that you're supposed to do, you're a professional, And I mean, particularly when you're looking at a guy like Carmelo Anthony, or you're looking at a guy like Amari Stoudemire or Tyson Chandler, you know what? I'm going to take Tyson Chandler out of that. I'm going to take him out because I think that Chandler is probably the one guy whose effort you never really had to question for the entire season. But I mean, specifically for Carmelo Anthony, and not to pick on Melo, but Melo kind of made it known that he was not putting forth 100% effort under Mike D'Antoni. Now, in my opinion, you look at it and you say, okay, well, since D'Antoni's been gone, they've gone 11-3. They're a much better team, especially on the defensive end, and Carmelo himself is playing a lot better. Okay, fine, so it seems like things are working out. But I don't think that I can ever put myself in a situation where I'm going to say that it's okay that a certain player quit on a coach. So to answer your question, Jacob, I'd have to say yes, that is something that concerns me, mainly because Tyson Chandler did a commercial with the Knicks, for the Knicks a couple weeks ago, and he said you don't just play with your teammates, you play for your teammates. And I think that that's a very powerful statement. I think it's something that any guy that's going to call himself a leader, particularly a leader of a team that hopes to be able to contend for an NBA championship, I think that that's something that you really have to buy into, something you really have to believe, and I don't think that Carmelo did that while he was playing for Mike D'Antoni. And, that's just subjective belief on my part. But another thing to look at is to say, well, you know what? If Carmelo was playing this well for the entire season, the Knicks probably would not be in danger of missing out on the playoffs. So, I mean, that's a very long answer to your question, and for me, that's a yes. That is something that should concern anybody that's a fan of this team, because at the end of the day, I think what it's indicative of is poor leadership, and what the Knicks need from Carmelo, aside from 30 points a game and 48% shooting from the field, is good leadership.
I happen to agree with you. I think that's an issue with Carmelo from a leadership standpoint, and even the fact that he is playing now doesn't necessarily erase the leadership deficiencies that he's had. I'm going to direct this question to Tommy. And then this is an interesting one. Jacob made a statement before you guys got on in reference to the Knicks. And the Knicks right now are tied with Philly for the 7th spot. And Milwaukee's 2 games back of both teams in a loss column. If you look at the schedules, very frankly, Philly's schedule and Milwaukee's schedule are much more generous than the one the Knicks have in front of them. Now, I do think the Knicks are going to make the playoffs, and they're playing well enough to do it. I think Anthony has got them at a high level and playing very well. But let's go to the disaster scenario that they don't make the playoffs. If they don't make the playoffs, considering everything they went through this season, Tommy, do you look at this season as a total failure for them?
Oh, if they miss the playoffs, absolutely. And I know who would look at it as a catastrophe, and that's James Dolan. I mean, you can't raise ticket prices on your season ticket holders 49%, and then again another 5%, and host over the last 2 years two playoff games. This season was a big stepping stone for them. They had two superstars that you had to figure they had to find a way to meld together offensively because they both struggled, and I think that's an important part and something we talked about today. Are they compatible? Is Carmelo and Amari Stoudemire compatible to play together in the offense? And we don't know that to be the case because they played well without each of them in the lineup. So here comes Amari coming back into the fold, and let's say they win tonight and he comes back in the fold in a couple of games, and they're, pretty much secured in that 7th spot and separate themselves from Milwaukee, and all of a sudden they lose 3 or 4 games in a row. Then it turns into, okay, we definitely know what the issue is, and that's the fact that Amari and Melo can't play together. Now, where do you go from there? You can't trade Amari. I mean, the only way that you could possibly trade Amari Stoudemire is if you package Jeremy Lin, to a team that could leverage and utilize his marketing ability and his ability to sell jerseys, and they need a point guard. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is, if Woodson can get them in a situation where Carmelo is comfortable on the block at the small forward, and Amari, as Moke said today, is just knocking down mid-range jumpers, which is what I've been talking about all year long, and how he's going to fit into this thing is, dude, you just got to pick and pop. You got to get the occasional isolation on the elbow and try to get some stuff in transition, and even with the second unit, and hopefully that continues their flow offensively and allows them to get into the playoffs. If they can't do that and they miss the playoffs, I mean, it's catastrophic, at least as far as the owner is concerned.
Now, you kind of segued a perfect question for me here, Tommy, because I don't think Melo and Amari can coexist together, and I just think there's enough evidence out there to show it. We saw how great the Knicks played prior to Melo coming. Granted, there was a lot of pieces that left the team because of the Melo trade, so we'll take that in consideration. But, just looking at what we see now, you kind of see two guys who need the ball in their hands, and unless one of them or both of them are willing to be unselfish at all times, I don't think it's going to work. Down the long haul, and it really depends on what else they put around them. So, having said that,
I don't mean to jump in. I will say this to the Celtics fan because you know how much I respect you, Jacob. I mean, Kevin Garnett is still looking for help from Game 1 against Amari when both of them were in the lineup, and Knicks fans are still upset over the weakest charge call of all time. When Amari passed the ball to the corner, Tony Douglas knocked down a 3. They would have been up 7 going with about 2.5 minutes left to go in the game, and they win Game 1 going away. And then obviously Amari gets in foul trouble. But let's give Amari a little credit with them together. He absolutely destroyed Kevin Garnett in Game 1 last year, and I know you know that too.
Oh, he absolutely did, but it was the closest sweep that has ever happened. I'll give you that.
Jacob, I had the over/under on Tommy hammering you about the Celtics at 10 minutes, and I took the under. I lost my bet. It was the over. He went to 17 minutes of being on before he slammed you about the Celtics.
So I know you guys want to have a little fun, and this is what our show's all about. We like to get people out of their comfort zone. So, having said that, whatever the Knicks have right now is not working. Going into the off season, forget any contract issues or any insurance issues at Amare. If you had to move one of the two guys, who do you move and why? And I want to hear what both of you guys say, but we'll let Tommy go first since he likes to hammer the Celtics.
Well, I don't think Amari's tradable, Jacob, to be honest with you, and it's very difficult unless they bring back an equally bad contract. And Moke wrote a great piece for Sheridan who says possible destinations earlier in the year. I don't know how if that changes as the season goes along, and guys who could possibly be dealt are now secure, or vice versa. Are there other opportunities? The thing about Amari for sure is that he's going to have to be traded for a big contract, and there's really not that many out there, and there's not going to be that many thanks to the CBA, the new CBA. So, and they traded their entire team for Carmelo. You know that they're not going to give up on Carmelo. So, will they explore the opportunities of trading a Jeremy Lin in addition to Amari? That to me is something that could happen, but and it would have to be the right situation. And I would think of maybe a Toronto, maybe a Los Angeles in a Pau Gasol situation, or something along those lines where you're thinking about bringing back contracts in exchange. But the original question is, who do you get rid of first? I don't think there's a question that it's Amari.
All right, I'm going to ask Moke this question, because if I ask Tommy this question, I know what Tommy's answer is going to be, without a doubt in my mind. And I want to hear Moke's question. Moke, gun to your head, okay? Who's going to be the Knicks head coach next year? If I ask Tommy the question, I know I'm getting Phil Jackson. I know that for a fact. Okay? Now, Moke, I'm going to ask you this question. Gun to your head, who's the Knicks head coach next season?
Oh man, that's a nice question, and I told Tommy earlier when we made the arrangement to all get on together, I said, Tommy, I'm getting tired of agreeing with you all the time, so I'm going to make sure that I disagree with you here. All right, so putting me on the spot, man, that's kind of tough. But the thing that I've realized throughout this whole situation is that Phil Jackson's name has obviously come up a lot, and there's been a lot of talk of Jeff Van Gundy also. A couple weeks ago, he was on with Michael Kay, and he had I don't know if I would say friendly or glowing commentary on the Knicks or James Dolan, but I was listening, and I can tell you in that conversation that Jeff Van Gundy would not foreclose the possibility of a return to the Knicks. And I've also heard that is something that Dolan himself would be open to. That being said, now, this is going to sound really funny because I seem to be glowing about the Knicks lately because I think that they're a much better defensive team. I think that they probably will get into the playoffs as the 8th seed. I think they're probably going to stay down there in 8th. I think that they are going to play the Bulls in the first round. And I said that I think the Knicks could beat the Bulls in the first round. Could is such an important word there. Mainly if Derrick Rose is unhealthy and if Carmelo can give you 30 points a night in a playoff series. All right. So all of that said, I'm going to go with Mike Woodson because I think that if Mike Woodson, as it stands now, his team is 11-3. They have 10 games remaining, I believe. If his team ends up, let's say the 10 games left, let's say they go 6-4, all right, that would make them 17-7 over their final 24 games. If they walk into the playoffs, and even if they push Chicago, let's say they take Chicago to 6 games, and you end up with 3 games in Madison Square Garden, and you lose the series 4-2, but let's say 2 of those games were really tight, and you end up losing by 4 or 5 points. If all of that happens, I think it would be really hard to look at the situation objectively. And I'm an objective guy, okay? I like facts, I like wins and losses, and I like how the team actually looks. I like facts. If you look at that factually and objectively, I think it'd be really, really hard to say that Mike Woodson does not deserve to be brought back, even on as little as a 2-year deal. The last thing I'm going to throw in there is I can tell you for sure, I'm around the team and I, talk to a lot of guys that know a thing or two about this team and about this franchise. Carmelo is going to have a lot of input as to who the next coach for the Knicks is going to be, and I can tell you that Carmelo does like playing for Mike Woodson. So, the very, very long answer to the question, and it seems like that's what I specialize in, is I'm going to go ahead and say Mike Woodson. How about that? Let's have some love for the incumbent.
You actually saved my opinion on New Yorkers for a lifetime there, Moke, because if you didn't say anybody than Mike Woodson, I was ready to throw you all under the bus and say, where's your loyalty? This man just brought you back from the dead, is going to bring you into the playoffs, and you're about to kick him out. I was about to get a little nervous there, but I'm glad you did. And as for Gundy, he's not going to burn any bridges. He's going to say nice things about everybody. We started talking about, the Charlotte Bobcats open vacancy. He's going to say nice things there too, probably. He's just trying to get another job in the league. So I'm very happy that you said Mike Woodson, because I agree. I think the man deserves, at least an extension for even 1 year is okay, because he wasn't really brought in there to be the coach. But that's about it, all I got for Knicks, because I know you wanted to...
Well, Jacob, I got a question for you. How
Okay.
much you been lifting weights to throw me under the bus? Because my answer is John Calipari. And I'm not such a lightweight. I'm tough to throw under that bus.
well, the thing about Calipari, in my opinion, is he relates to people well. No one can doubt that. But where I think he might struggle is he might let the players do too much, where in this league you got to have someone to push the thumb down on these stars, because the stars will do whatever they want, and I think that's evident. And I think that would be a big learning curve for John Calipari coming into this league, where he'd have to figure out that fine line where you say no and yes to these superstars.
I happen to agree with you, but I think that the Knicks are going to be worried about that, and they're just going to go ahead and hire him. All right, let's transition to do our last 20 minutes around the league. I think that's a great idea. We were talking about Dallas earlier, Tommy. And, the fact that they're in danger of not making the playoffs, which I can't remember the last time we saw that with a team that won an NBA title and may not make the playoffs. The Suns are one back of them in the loss column. We talked about Tyson Chandler as a possible defensive player of the year. He was the major subtraction of that team. Do you believe that's been the major factor in the Mavericks really struggling this year?
I think alcohol is, to be honest. Brandon Wright has actually done a pretty decent job. Hayward is. I think they overestimated what they had as replacements for Tyson Chandler. But I really think that that when you talk about Jason Terry, you talk about the kid, and certainly Derrick, who had no problem admitting it. In a shortened season, they enjoy themselves during the off season, and you have a lot of hungry teams out there, and you mentioned the Suns, and can you the true, and I'm going to just go off on this for a couple seconds here. Henry Abbott obviously does a very good job with what's going on over there, and that fraternity of people who have platforms to write for each team. But they started this anti-tanking thing. And, this was something that we talked about 3 years ago, because Andrew Smith, who is our other compadre on PKB TV, he actually wrote his legal thesis, 40 pages, on how to stop the NBA from tanking. And, we shopped it around. We sent it out to certain publications that we had connections with, and people really liked it. It was just very, very long. And his overriding point was, you give the first-round pick, forget the draft. The draft is a game show. Forget the lottery, not the draft. Excuse me, the lottery. You don't need – it's like Mark Jones or Stuart Scott or whoever's hosting needs like one of those Bob Barker microphones, those long, skinny microphones, and it should be sponsored by Turtle Wax or something ridiculous. And this is the amazing marketer that David Stern is that's actually sellable. But, the point being – you have to reward teams for just missing the playoffs and not reward teams for losing games on purpose and calling up D-leaguers and pretending like you're trying to win games. The Suns, if they miss the playoffs, the Suns will absolutely positively get screwed because they're going to be right outside. They're going to obviously not have the percentage to move up in the draft and really improve. And that's a key thing for their franchise, as it talks about keeping a Steve Nash, and what's the future with Grant Hill and developing young players. The initial point was Dallas, but at the end of the day, you have to applaud teams like Phoenix for pushing for the 8th seed when they could have really kind of nailed it in a long time ago. Talked about trading Nash and trying to get value back, and for lack of a better phrase, really tanking. But it would be. Brian, I don't know the last NBA team that won an NBA title who didn't make the playoffs. I can't think of that off the top of my head, but wouldn't surprise me if it were unprecedented.
Now, I'm just going to say I do not feel bad for the Phoenix Suns. Whenever you sell off a draft pick that ends up being Rajon Rondo for financial reasons, I don't feel bad for you. If you're not willing to spend, I don't really feel bad.
Always going back to the Celtics.
Well, actually, I'm going to bring it to my arch nemesis, and that is the San Antonio Spurs, who seem to be just coasting the rest of this way, and they were on such a hot start. And my question to both of, all three of you guys actually is, if you're Greg Popovich, and I understand rest is important for Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili, get him healthy. I can understand giving Parker a little bit more rest, but to actually sit all three of them down in a game against a team fighting for a playoff spot, would you rather just fight it out and win the number one overseed, or do they think that that's just a bad curse from last year?
Who's going to go first?
Well, I guess I'll jump in there first.
Go ahead, Moke.
It's really funny, Jacob, because when I found out last night that not only did the Spurs' big three not play, but they didn't even make the trip with the team to Salt Lake. And that, to me, earlier earlier I mentioned leadership, and I mentioned, objective stuff. And to me, there are just certain things, like if you decide that you're going to sit them for rest, I mean, I can understand that because you want the guys to be fresh for the playoffs, but I think at the very least they should travel with the team, just because I think it's important for the camaraderie, if not for anything else. But also, let's think about all the people in Utah that actually pay their hard-earned money to go and watch the Spurs play, I think that those fans there in Salt Lake, and there are some that probably went there to see the Spurs play, I think that they were kind of robbed of, of an opportunity to see a very great team. Not only that, I mean, that game was really, really important last night. The Jazz are in the midst of a playoff fight themselves. Right now, they're only one back in the loss column of the Nuggets for that eighth and final spot. So I think, in a way, sitting guys out because you want them to be rested for the playoffs, guys that are not, battling with, at least according to any reports, are not battling with any injuries or anything like that, I think it does a disservice to fans. I think it does a disservice to the team itself, because now they're still trailing the Thunder for the number one record overall. And I think it kind of does a disservice to the game. Like, these games are important for everybody. And, I mean, we'd get mad if the Pistons decided to sit down their, three of their starters. We'd get mad if they started tanking so that they could have better lottery odds. And my question is, well, how is this that much different? They're kind of tanking so that they can have better odds of winning the championship. So because it's the championship and not the lottery, it's excusable? Not in my opinion. I can't say that.
All right, Tommy, you go ahead next, and then I'll wrap this one up because I got an interesting perspective here.
Well, first of all, what I love most about the Spurs is that, yes, they lost in the first round last year to a really good Memphis team who's getting, obviously, they had a situation with Zach Randolph getting into a car accident. I think we saw that today or maybe yesterday. And that's unfortunate for them because they really started to play good basketball. But
he still had 14 rebounds last night, Tom.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So he's then he'll figure it out. He'll manage. But I mean, the Richard Jefferson for Steven Jackson trade. I mean, nobody's talking about the significance and the upgrade that brought to the team. And they really haven't made that poor of a decision or poor of a move, in my opinion, in like a decade. They are always they can rebuild on the fly with one or two moves. They're like the Devils. They really just, if they have one step back in a year, they just come back stronger the next year. And I think the comparison would be like a Tim Duncan and Brodeur. But
great analogy.
Thank you. I mean, I just love how they can just bounce back. And I remember sitting last year in practice in Greenberg up at the Westchester facility for the Knicks and talking to Donnie Walsh, and we're just. I asked him flat out, I said, who's the guy that you've been around or drafted or just know that people really don't understand? I expected him to say Artest, but he said Steven Jackson. He said Steven Jackson gets mad at people. He gets mad at his coaches because he wants to play 48 minutes every single game, literally. Like, he wants to just be on the court the entire game. And he's not difficult. Like, obviously, you could see him butting heads with Scott Skiles, and, whoop-de-doo. I can't believe Scott Skiles would have issues with anybody. Like, Steven Jackson is just a guy who is just a tremendous, tremendous player and a competitor who I think is misinterpreted and misunderstood. So I give full marks to that situation, and I really think that's made the Spurs a lot tougher team, and a team now with the Mavericks moonwalking and the Lakers moonwalking, and obviously Thunder are right there. But I can see the Spurs being for real. They've been real all season.
It's interesting now, and I happen to agree with you there. Popovich made a reference when he was asked about this to the schedule, and I think Moke makes a very good point about the paying customers in Utah do get cheated. That is certainly a product of Popovich doing something like that. But I also think that, no one in the NBA, when they made the schedule, was all that concerned with the paying customers and the quality of play that they were going to have when they scheduled each team to play 66 games in 123 days. So I think to put that on the Spurs and Popovich, I think it's more systemic, that problem. And I do agree that it's a significant problem. When you look at their schedule, okay, they played Sunday and Monday back-to-backs with Utah. Sunday at home, Monday on the road. Then they're Wednesday night at home to L.A., Wednesday night at home to Memphis, Saturday night at home to Phoenix. Him sitting those three guys last night gave them Monday and Tuesday off, 2 full off days in between games. That he's going to have them good for the Lakers and good for the Grizzlies, very tough competition. And it wouldn't shock me if he had those three sit all over again Saturday night against Phoenix. Because I do think that the way Popovich is looking at this, we pushed hard last year for the number 1 seed, and in the end, we got knocked out by an 8 seed. We need to be healthy and rested going into the playoffs. My best players need to be in good shape here, and I'm not going to worry so much. If we get the number 1 seed, great. If we don't, well, it didn't do a ton for us last year. So the rest is going to be a heck of a lot more important, and I think the 1 seed is a little more important in the East this year than the West. And the reason I say this, and I'm curious to hear the opinions of all three of you guys on this, I think the 1 seed's more important in the East than the West because I think you have a pretty good idea who we're going to see in the East final, Chicago, Miami. That's what it's going to be. So that 1 seed's important for a home court advantage. The West is wide open. The matchups are crazy. I wouldn't be surprised to see Memphis beat Oak City in a series. I wouldn't be surprised to see Denver beat San Antonio in a series. You can take any of these lower 4 teams and find a team in the upper 4 that you can match them up with, and they can hurt them. So that's my statement. The East 1 seed's a lot more important than the West 1 seed. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. Moke, you go first.
Well, I don't know. The number 1 seed, obviously you know what? I think it's very important for brackets, right? Because, obviously, 1-8, and then in the second round, if the seeds hold, then 1 would play 4. I do understand the point because, in the East, even though things are kind of up in the air a bit, we have an idea of at least where certain teams are going to be. The West is obviously, it's crazy. I think 3rd to 8th is separated by maybe like four games or something like that. So I definitely understand the perspective. I do think it is important, though, because a lot of the teams out West, especially the Thunder being one of them, the Thunder are, I'm looking at the standings now, by the way. Thunder are 24-5 at home. They're 18-10 on the road. It's like they've lost twice as many games on the road than they have at home. And that's a trend that you kind of see throughout the league. Teams play better at home. So I think that the seeds are probably more important in the East, but not that much less important out West, if only for home court advantage.
Tom, go ahead.
When I see Oklahoma City matched up right now with Denver at the 1-8, I'm sure Denver hasn't done much to move past Oklahoma City. If I'm not mistaken, Oklahoma City beat them last year pretty quickly. Denver on the road winning 14 games is impressive, but I think Oklahoma City would love to be in that 1 spot, obviously, as it relates to who they're playing in the 1-8 matchups to start. I think San Antonio would love to be in the 1 seed as well, and that's really not that groundbreaking of a statement because why would you ever in a million years want to position yourself to play the ex-NBA champions if as Dallas is right now? Of course, there's still 10 games left, but I think the value and the quality at the bottom of the Western Conference is much stronger, with the exception of the Knicks, than what's on the bottom of the Eastern Conference. So I would say, I think, Brian, your point was, the one seed playing, it's either to be the Knicks, the Sixers, or Milwaukee is much more significant, much more important. I agree, but I always go back to a very, very traditional, very, very old school statement that just says, from a matchup perspective, you worry about that when you show up at the gym. Your job is to make sure that you're playing absolutely the best basketball that you can, and then you're the healthiest you can be going into the tournament, and then you take your chances from there. And that's always where I felt from a team perspective.
Simple but effective.
And to kind of go on your point there, Tommy, when you start thinking about who you'd rather match up with, you start, developing doubts about yourself. And when you start developing doubts is when you're actually going to lose. So that's a fantastic quote to throw out there. But to answer Brian's question, San Antonio just doesn't want to see Memphis. And the way they're going, they're not going to see Memphis in the first round. So that's good news for them. But to reiterate your point again, Brian, I like the matchups from 5 through 8 over the 1 through 4. Now, not all of them, but, you're looking at the Lakers and Houston. I think Houston can give Lakers fits. They got the big guys, and Dallenberg and Camby down there, and they have not a care in the world for that team down there. They have nothing to lose, and I think that can be very, very dangerous for them, the Lakers, that is. And then, moving out east, I absolutely think the number 1 seed means something, especially for the number 1 and 2 seeds, because we're watching the Miami Heat just give up on the road. They don't care. And Moke pointed out the Oklahoma City home and away record. The Heat is probably just as bad. And for whatever reason, the Heat are just not the same team on the road. Whether it's the lack of leadership, they kind of just stand around looking at each other. And we saw it at times last year during their playoff run. Those times where they look lost, especially against Dallas, they look lost. And when that adversity hits, where are they going to be? And you'd rather be at home with the quote unquote 6th man in the crowd helping you out there. So I agree. I think the Eastern Conference, especially for the 1 and 2 seed, you're going to want that 1 seed because ideally they're going to match up based on what we all know, what we all think. Curveballs might be thrown out there, which I think will happen, but we'll go with conventional wisdom that it's going to be the Heat and Bulls, and the Heat would rather have home court.
All right, before we wrap up, now, Moke, you and I had a Steve Kerr issue that we were going to battle out. I'm looking at the time. I don't think we have enough time to do it today. We're going to get you back. Moke and I, just so we have a fundamental disagreement about what Steve Kerr was to the Suns. Moke feels like he ruined him. I feel like he was in the process of saving him when he got cut off, when he got fired. So we'll hit that at another time when we have more time, Moke. I didn't forget about that, and I want to do that.
No, it's so funny, man. I was ready for you, man. I got my notes written up and everything.
You want to give me your case in a quick 3 minutes? Jacob, is it okay if we run an extra 5 today?
Doesn't matter to me.
Go ahead, Moke. Lay it out to me. I'll give you my argument, and then I want to get everybody's championship picks before we close up.
You know what? I was setting you up, man. I got the booby trap. I set the booby trap from the very beginning because one of my themes here has been objective facts, right? That's something I've said so many times.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think somebody that would say that, Steve Kerr, and I'm not saying you're wrong. You're wrong, Brian. I think that, I think he did a good job. If you're going to look at the situation subjectively, right? But, objectively, I just look at it like this. The 3 years before Kerr came on the scene in Phoenix, they won 3 division titles in a row. The 3 years before Kerr came, they were 177 and 69. That's a 72 win percentage. The 3 years with him, they were 155 and 91. That's 593. And, there are a couple of other things. They Western Conference Finals twice before him, once with him. I just can't really look at anything objective and say that he improved the team. Now, the other thing that I would say is, Phoenix was all, it was Mike D'Antoni, it was Steve Nash, it was Amari Stoudemire, and the rest of the cast that they had there. Rajon
Grant Hill, too.
Boris Diaw, Grant Hill. That was their team, and that city loved that team. And Steve Kerr came on the scene, and within a year, within 2 years, well, actually, I want to say within 2 years, D'Antoni was gone, Amari was gone, and the whole franchise was just changed. And when something like that happens, it's like, all right, you're the general manager, you're the president of the team, you're brought in to do a job. When you take those kind of huge risks, everyone kind of looks at you and wags their finger and say, this better work. And Steve Kerr, on his watch, that thing was blown up. And you know what? It didn't work. And now Steve Nash is, in the twilight of his career. He hasn't sniffed the success that he had while Mike D'Antoni was there. And that's basically why I can't say that I like what he did there in Phoenix.
Fair enough. I'm going to lay my case out, okay? Because, yes, you give very strong points about the record with D'Antoni before they brought in Terry Porter. And I will also say that the Shaq trade was ill-advised and not smart, but it did get him out from under Marion's contract, which was something that Kerr wanted to do. Here's how I'll rebut you. Kerr was never given an opportunity to finish the job. He determined that the way D'Antoni had that team playing, they were never going to win a title. So he figured, to take 3 steps forward, we're going to have to take 2 steps back. And that's what he was attempting to do. Now, within, I believe it was his 3rd year there, he had them back in the West Finals, and they gave the Lakers everything they could handle. Okay, you can't blame him for Amari Stoudemire leaving because he was kicked out before Amari Stoudemire left. And I can only believe that Kerr knew enough about the core that they had and the guys that were there. And, they didn't have Marion, but he had brought in Grant Hill to be a complementary piece to Nash and Stoudemire. That fit very, very well there. He also discovered a guy that we're watching right now play unbelievable for the Houston Rockets in Goran Dragic. And if you remember, Dragic had a game against San Antonio where they swept San Antonio that year. Dragic had a game where he scored 22 points in the last 8 minutes of the game. So Kerr found some gems for them. But here's the point. Steve Kerr never would have decided to not give Amari $100 million and then for the same period of time turn around and commit $85 million to Akeem Warwick, Channing Frye, and Josh Childress. I just can't imagine that Kerr would have done that. And my argument back to you about Kerr ruining the Suns is that Kerr did an incomplete job because he wasn't given a chance to finish the job. Robert Sarver fired him because he wouldn't take a pay cut after getting the team back to the West Finals in 3 years. So there's my case.
And you know what? That's a magnificent case, and a lot of the things, I guess everything that you said there was factually correct. So, I think really, something happens, and some guys say tomato and some guys say tomato, right? And I think that's kind of where we are.
Well, we're going to agree. Listen, we both made good cases. We're going to agree to disagree. We had time to lay it out. Let's do this. Before we wrap up, okay? Let me get everybody's pick for the championship. Who's going to the finals? Who's winning it? Tommy, you start.
Well, for me, I think I'm not going to really go aside from what the obvious is, and that's 2 things. Number one, Miami is very, very good, and they are once again in the top 5 in total offensive rating and total defensive rating, which to me, and they were at last year as well. And they did a tremendous job last year in getting to the finals and putting a real hurting on the Bulls to get there. I just and bringing in Turiaf, if they can keep his bones from snapping, I can't. That's a very slick move for them to help them, and they're resting Norris Cole right now a little bit. I think he's going to give them some good minutes as a rookie, which he's been doing for the better part of the season. The thing that I point to in the West is Scott Brooks. I don't love Scott Brooks, the in-game manager. I question him as a defensive strategist, but I also understand that he has some pretty smart people around him who have helped them crack the top 10 in defensive rating. I think they're 9th right now. Last year, I think they were like 14th or 15th. And, they're obviously the best offensive team in the league with to me, the best player in the game offensively, and that's Kevin Durant. And you could talk about the MVP debate and whatnot. I'm not really concerned about that stuff. So awards are meaningless to me. There's only one award that counts, and that's the championship. I like what Popovich has done in San Antonio. Obviously, I just mentioned the Steven Jackson move, which makes them a lot tougher. Defensively, they're much better. Last year, they were a Mike D'Antoni team. They were all high-octane offense, and they had pretty much zero substance defensively. That has changed as well. That they are very close to being in the top 10 in defensive rating. So, one of those 2 teams is going to come out of the West. I do believe that Durant's the best player on the floor and will will rise above the disparity between Scott Brooks and Greg Popovich, which to me is very vast. I think Russell Westbrook has lots to prove, and certainly Perkins and Ibaka have them very, very solid up front to handle a very aging Tim Duncan. Look for Splitter to have a good playoff run, and obviously we know what the Spurs can do with Parker and Ginobili. But I see Oklahoma City, I see Miami, and in the end, I have to say that Oklahoma City will be in a very, very tight series. And I really don't know. I have no idea who's going to win, but my gut tells me that the best offensive player on the floor, like Derrick last year, will win the championship, and that's Oklahoma City.
All right. That's an interesting take.
It's a long-winded one. I actually hadn't thought of it. I talked myself.
No, but you came around to it. That's, it's not something you're hearing a ton of as good as they've been. So I like it. Well, an interesting take.
It's a little disappointing for me, Brian, because I wanted to disagree with Tommy. But it's actually funny, and this is on paper. Before the season began, Chris Sheridan went to everybody on his staff, and he got their predictions. Back then, I predicted that it would be OKC Miami in the finals. I did pick Miami to win, but I do think that I'm ready to change that now. Based on what I've seen, I think that Oklahoma City is the best team in the NBA. I think that Kevin Durant at this point is one of the best players in the NBA, if not the best player. I think he's right up there with Rose, Wade, and LeBron. And it's funny because those four guys are basically, I should say two of those four guys are on the same team. But at this point, I'm going to go with Oklahoma City. They've made believers out of me. And James Harden is a major reason why. I think, because he's been on the bench his first couple of years, we didn't really get to understand how good he actually is, both with the ball defensively and shooting the ball. I think that he would make a world of difference in the finals, and I don't really think Miami has an answer for him. And now before I turn it over, I just want to say Goran Dragic, oh man, this guy has been amazing. And as we speak, he's winning one fantasy league championship for me and destroying me in the other. So some love to Goran Dragic.
That's great.
Now, I will say to you, Moke, that I do know how good James Harden is because every day I wake up wishing that he was involved in the trade with Kendrick Perkins and not Jeff Green. But I know Danny tried. He tried so hard, it just wasn't going to happen. I'm going to disagree with you guys. I am penciling in Miami, and I do have Chicago and Miami meeting in the finals, or the Eastern Conference Finals, so we're all in agreement there. But I cannot sleep on the Spurs, and Tommy kind of pointed to it earlier. I just think the Greg Popovich and Scott Brooks is going to be a butt-whooping matchup for Scotty Brooks there. And, Popovich is playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, and I think the experience and depth of the Spurs is going to be too much for the young Thunder to handle. Now, I love the Thunder to death. I just think they're one more year away from getting it. This is their first, quote-unquote, full season with Kendrick Perkins, which has helped their defensive rating quite a bit. But, once you get a couple of guys in foul trouble on the Oklahoma City Thunder, I'm not too sold on the rest of their bench to match up against a team like the Spurs. So I actually have the Spurs and Heat, and having said that, I'm going to continue my theory that the Miami Heat will be the Buffalo Bills of the basketball world, and they will lose many championships over winning them. So I'm going to pick the Spurs again, and they're going to get one more ring for Duncan on his way out.
I will say this, Jacob, just to jump in very quickly about Kendrick Perkins. I think there was a ridiculous stat out there that he is like a 75% winning percentage with both Boston and the Thunder. So to your point, yes, it's one full year with him. Hopefully he stays healthy for the Thunder's sake. But it really is. I'm glad you mentioned it. To me, it's going to come down to chess, which we know Prokhorov. I'm in Brooklyn. Popovich can play. I think the best offensive player is going to win in that series.
Well, that's a quote for the ages, by the way. Popovich is playing chess and Brooks is playing checkers. Love it. Love it, Jacob. A gem you came out with. I'm going. I've been saying all year. I looked at Miami and Oklahoma City getting there. I'm very confident Miami. Very confident Miami. I think last year was an absolute education for them. I see a more cohesive team. I see a more focused team, and more important than any of that is I see a head coach who learned what it's like to deal with a team. Getting them through the playoffs, the right rest for guys, the right combinations, the right matchups, thinking outside the box. I think Spo's a smart coach who got out-coached in the NBA Finals last year. I see him doing a much better job this year. So I'm all over the Heat there because I just don't see how the Bulls are going to have an answer for them and be able to score in the fourth quarter when they put LeBron on Derrick Rose. I just don't see where the Bulls are going to get points. In the West is interesting because I said Oklahoma City at the beginning of the year. I'm lukewarm on Oklahoma City right now. I'm going to stick with them because I'm not a guy that changes his mind well. And listen, I think San Antonio certainly could be a very tough matchup for them, but I do think the team that everybody's sleeping on, that is an absolute Cinderella and could run to the finals, is the Memphis Grizzlies. I really do. Am I picking them over the Thunder? No, because I'm stubborn. But I do think that the Grizzlies are a team that has everything you need to do to make the NBA Finals and possibly win a championship. Do I think they're going to win a championship this year? I don't. And I'm still picking Oklahoma City to go to the finals. But if Oklahoma City doesn't go to the finals, I think it'll be the Grizzlies. With that said, I have Miami winning the whole thing. I've had them winning the whole thing all year. I think this is their year, their time. The window's right. The young teams that are moving up just aren't quite experienced enough in the Thunder and the Grizzlies. I think the Spurs, as well rested as they are, the playoffs are going to be a grind. I believe, Tommy, you pointed this out a couple of weeks ago in that the playoff schedule is also going to be more compressed to get all these games in a shorter amount of time. I don't think that's going to bode well for the Spurs because they're not going to have the option to sit in guys. Everybody's going to have to play every night. So I think the Thunder's young legs are going to get them to the finals, but I think it's the Miami Heat's year, boys.
I'm a very big fan.
Buffalo Bills of the NBA, man. That's my man. I like that.
Tommy, I liked your Devil's Brodeur analogy much better.
Brian,
that was on the fly.
Brian, I just want to toss this out, Brian. I'm actually a huge fan of the Grizzlies myself, and I think what's really funny about this year is that when you look at the top three teams, the Thunder, the Bulls, and the Heat, they are each so flawed in a fundamental way. I think that the Spurs and the Grizzlies, perhaps of all contenders, are so balanced, and they just have so much talent. I think the Grizzlies, you kind of have to wonder about their health, and you kind of have to wonder about their coaching as well as their chemistry, because they're just getting Zach Randolph back. But yeah, I mean, definitely the Spurs and the Grizzlies, I think, are two of the most balanced teams out there, and I'm really, really looking forward to the playoffs this year.
Us as well. Guys, we can't thank you enough for joining us today. You guys have been absolutely outstanding. We've got Moke Hamilton from SheridanHoops.com, Tommy D from the KnicksBlog.com. Go visit their sites. Go check these guys out, two of the best at what they do. We love having them, guys. We're getting you both back on soon. We're looking forward to it. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. Had a great time.
Hey, thanks so much.
Tommy.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Moke. We'll do it again soon, guys.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Well, the one thing we learned today, Brian, is 1 hour is definitely not enough with these two guys.
No, you know what, though? I got to tell you, not to break arms, patting each other on the back. That was one of the better shows we've had in a long time.
Oh, it absolutely was. And as I just pointed out, we almost need a 2-hour segment with commercials and breaks and a producer.
We really do. And I will say this, and then actually I got to run too. I will say this. I thought the NBA stuff today was better than the Knicks stuff, and those guys are Knick experts.
Well, then that's the point of the show. I like to bring people to show their skills and their talents, because even though you might be a beat writer for one team, you still watch the league, you still watch other teams, you follow the stories, and you have opinions, and that's what we try to do. We try to bring people who are robots on television and get them on here and be a human being with us. Come talk to us. Tell us what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and I think that's what a lot of our guests really appreciate about our show.
Absolutely, and it was a blast today. Jacob, I thank you, my friend.
Absolutely, and I'll sign us off. So, again, that was Moke Hamilton from Sheridan Hoops and Tommy D from the KnicksBlog.com. Alongside of me is Brian Geltzeiler from the HoopsCritic.com. Check out all their websites, all their stuff. They do a phenomenal job all the way around. I'm Jacob Noble from the ProBasketballTalk.com, and playoff time's coming up, folks. Take it easy. We almost meet our moment of truth. The same shifty cat that you hang with and do your thing with can set you up and wet you up. Nigga, peep the language, it's universal. You play with fire, it may hurt you or burn you. Lessons you should learn through. Let's face